Hi, and welcome to this week's video blog and some assembly required. I'm Sarah Hammerker. Today I wanted to talk about a question I often get from parents. That is, what do you do when a child is complying with the letter of the law, so to speak, but they're grumbling about it. They're rolling their eyes. They're saying no. They're throwing a hissy fit, but yet they are taking the trash out that you told them to do. What do you do with all that kind of verbal and nonverbal, what I like to call junk? Should we correct it? How often should we correct it? What should we do? All right, well, first let's talk about what the child is actually doing. And I think it's helpful to remember that kids, many times, especially when they're young, their emotions are out there. We see them, we know what they're thinking. And this is annoying sometimes to parents, but it's also a blessing because we know what's in their hearts. And as Christian parents, this is very important to us. We need to know what's in our kids' hearts so that we can help guide that heart. We can't change their hearts. We can't do that. If you want to know why, watch my other videos on discipline. But it's good for us to know what's in our kids' hearts. So when we see all that junk come out, that bad attitude, that eye rolling, shrugging, sarcastic tone, that, yeah, mom, sure, I'll do it, whatever, we're getting a glimpse into their heart. But we have to be careful here as parents because sometimes when we hear that, we latch on to their tone, we latch on to what they say, we latch on to the nonverbal, and it becomes a battle between us and our kids because we want them to go, yeah, mom, I'm going to take out the trash, thanks for telling me. No, they're not going to do that. 9 times out of 10, 99% of the time, they're going to not respond in a positive way. And the reason they do this is because they're little sinners just like us. They're human beings, and human beings want what we want when we want it, and we don't want to be told to do something when we're doing something else. I mean, think about your own heart when your spouse says to you, hey, would you do X? And you're right in the middle of the last chapter of this book you've been reading, and you just can't wait to see the ending of it. Or you just sat down after being on your feet all day and somebody needs something you to do something. How do we respond? We may hide it in our hearts so you can't see it, but we grumble on the inside. I think it's important for us parents to remember that we fall into this trap as well. Secondly, we have to pick our battles. Sometimes it's more important that the child's obedient than how the child does it. Some parents want their children to every time to obey with a cheerful heart. Sure, don't we all? But we're not going to get that. And I think it's important to realize that with parenting, we have to ignore a lot of that junk. We just have to go, okay, I'm not going to address this now. Because the child is not in a receptive mood to hear it. And oftentimes when we start nitpicking on that, it just destroys our relationship. And not destroys it, it breaks down our relationship with our child. I have 2 teenage daughters. They are wonderful, don't get me wrong, but occasionally we have a little teenage attitude. 9 times out of 10, I ignore it. I just let it go when they respond like that because I see that they're going to do what I asked them to do or not do what I told them not to do. They need to let off a little steam by being sarcastic about it, by rolling their eyes, by shrugging, by going, so be it. I let them have that because I'm the grown-up and I don't need to win. And this is important. We do not need to win on the attitude problem all the time. We just don't need to do it. Walk away from that. Be the grown-up. Be the adult that you're there. So we have to ignore a lot of it. If the child is doing what we told him to do, even though they're saying no, 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 so be it. One of my clients was saying that her preschooler would say no very loudly, like, it's time to take your nap. No, 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 I don't want to take my nap. She would say this all the way up the stairs with her mom to take her nap. And the mom was like, I've been ignoring it, but I feel like maybe I shouldn't. I'm like, no, you should. Ignore it. Don't respond. Or if you have to respond, come up with some stock responses like, yeah, if I was your age, I'd feel that way too. or I can see how you feel that way. And these are great for any child, to a response to any child when they start doing that junk. If you feel you have to respond, if you cannot not say anything, or sometimes you just really need to say something, but if you start attacking or start correcting them in that moment, you know they're not in a receptive mood, it'll just snowball into this huge deal. And then you can't even remember what they said to begin with. Come up with some stock phrases like, again, like, yeah, if I were your age, I feel that way too. I hear you. That must be disappointing. Yeah, I understand. I don't like to be interrupted about my book, but this needs to be done. You're not inviting pushback. You're commiserating with them a little bit, because sometimes, and this is 50-60% of the time, a child just wants to be acknowledged that this is a bum deal, that this really isn't fair, that this is, you get that that they just sat down to read a book and you're like, yeah, but you need to do X now. And I often realize when I tell my kid and he's just sat down that there's something he needs to do, I often say, I know you just sat down. I understand this is annoying, but you need to do X. And sometimes that softens the pushback, softens his attitude or her attitude. So those are some of the things that you can do. Now, what about that attitude though? What about it? You know, we can't let it go on, right? Because we don't want to have a kid who's always grumbling about things. You take the opportunities when they're not grumbling to talk to them about their heart, to talk to them about why they're grumbling. Why, if every time your son has to do his chores, he is just like throwing a fit as if you've told him he has to go without food and water for 3 days, or be locked in his room in the dungeon without any light. I don't know, whatever. I mean, they overreact. Of course they do. They're kids. So, but you can't let that attitude go on, because that's not healthy for them, and it's not healthy for your household to have that kind of angst all kind of grumbling around there. So sometimes you talk to your child, and I don't mean talk a long time. So we talk way too much to our kids. Let's face it. Keep it short and sweet, and say, you know, I've noticed that your attitude when you have to do your chores, that you know you have to do. This is not like extra stuff, maybe just the regular chores, that you grumble about it, that you act as if I've told you to, you know, that you're going to be working as my slave for hours, when really it's like a 10-15 minute chore. I've noticed that you've been really grumbly about this. Well, you know, what's going on? Well, I don't want to do it, blah, 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 blah. Listen to them. Don't correct them, just let them talk, and then say, how do you think that shows me, you know, what does that show me that's in your heart? Oh, I don't know. Well, no, you do. Come on, think about it. What's in your heart that you don't want to do, you don't want to contribute? Why do we, and sometimes like, why do we have chores? Because you're part of the family. Because you consume things in this family. And because you're not going to be a taker only. You're going to be a giver as well. Do you hear, am I complaining about everything? I don't like to do everything that I have to do. Am I complaining about it? No, I try not to, because it's not healthy for my heart. Because who are we really serving here? Are you serving me? Are you serving this family? You are, but who are you ultimately doing everything for? You're doing it for God. And sometimes just reminding of that can help that reset. Now, sometimes you might have to, you know, take in a punishment for it. One of my sons recently, he just could not stop this bad attitude. I mean, it was every single chore, and it was starting to really kind of infect the family. When it's every time, and it's every chore, and it's everything you ask him to do for several days, he's in a rut. He needs a reset. I'm going to provide it. So I had to discipline him. We had to, and he was not happy about that. You know, but I realized, I reminded him, I said, look, I said, you can't have your heart be in such a place that you're just spewing junk everywhere all the time. That's not healthy for you. It's not healthy for our family. And you didn't solve it, so now I'm going to give you a little extra impetus to solve that problem. He's proved 100% improvement. Does it mean that he never has that little bit of an angst or a grumble? No, but he's much better about it. He kind of nips it in the bud. He learns how to control it and to stop it. And that's what we want. So to recap, we have to ignore that junk sometimes. We have to remember that we have that grumbling in our own hearts. We have to set a good example for our kids by doing things that we don't want to do with the happy heart. We remind them of who they're serving and why they're doing it. And we remind them of why it's bad for them to have that kind of grumbling in his heart, how it makes them unhappy, how it's not how God really created us to be. We do all these things and it'll lessen in your household. There'll be flare-ups and flare-downs, but remember, you're the grown-up. Don't get into a tussle with your kids about attitude. You're the one who has to walk away. Get those stock answers and use them and walk away. Disengage. You know, kids don't like to grumble in a vacuum. You don't hear them in their room grumbling to themselves. Well, maybe some kids might, but on the whole, they like an audience. They want to feel that they're heard. And sometimes if you can give them that, they'll stop. I hope you've enjoyed this week's video blog on Some Assembly Required. Join me next week where we'll talk about some other aspect of parenting. And if there's ever something that you wish to hear me discuss, send me an email or leave a comment. Thanks and have a great day.